about what Columbia Science Review is, how you can get involved, and also we'll have time at the end to just talk about doing science at Columbia and what is, and if you have any questions on doing research and things like that. So yeah, without further ado, we'll get started. So what is Columbia Science Review? Columbia Science Review is a student-run club. Those of us with our cameras on are all members of the leadership team. And our overarching goal is to bring science and the general public closer together. So we notice that, especially in academia, there's a big gap between science, the world of science research, discoveries, and what the general public knows about it. So we accomplish this goal through two branches, and I'll speak on behalf of the executive board first, and then we'll have someone speak on behalf of the editorial board. But the executive board plans public interdisciplinary science events. So that involves things like panel events. We have big public outreach events that we'll get into later. And we have outreach programs that go into the city and interact with high schoolers and middle schoolers and such. And so we plan essentially interdisciplinary events surrounding science outreach for the broader public.
Hi, I'm Amanda. I'm a member of the editorial board. And on the editorial side, we will be producing 2 print publications, 1 per semester. Any subject is welcome that relates to science and scientific literacy, ranging from a new discovery to social perspectives of the scientific fields. So that's what we do twice a year. And we also have regularly updated blog posts, which allow people to continue sharing smaller topics or just little cocktail articles that have to do with something more recent, which you can check out on our website now.
So quickly, we're going to go over the organizational structure of the club because it is somewhat confusing. So we split the club broadly into 2 sides, which are the executive board, which plans the events, and the editorial board, which does writing. And these both have leadership, which is what we call core. So all of us with their cameras on, we're all part of core. So this includes like the president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, social media managers, editors in chief, etc. And we also have something called the media team, which also connects these 2, and they plan kind of like their Instagram presence, video projects, and such. And so the executive board and the editorial board function as somewhat separate entities. So executive board and editorial board do not have the same meetings. There's also a separate application process. However, we do all fit under the same umbrella, big family of Columbia Science Review. So we'll talk about our application a little bit later, and you'll see that you can apply for either one depending on your interests, or both if you want.
So we have had a little bit of delays caused through COVID, which has shifted our schedule quite a bit. But you can see through some of our past editorial publications, there's a lot of opportunities, whether you want to be a writer, an editor, an illustrator, or a layout designer. So kind of speaking to all of those roles, writers, again, we'll be writing 1 to 2 articles per semester, whether it's 1 print publication or 2 blog posts. And each article that's in the print journal will need an illustration. We've had some very, very talented illustrators in the past, as you can see from these really awesome covers. And this doesn't also show our most recent one, which we're still waiting to update on our website, which is exciting. And we also have obviously our editors and our layout designers to help us make these really beautiful publications. So as you see through these past issues, they really end up being these really great culminations of everyone's hard work throughout the semester, and they're really fun to read through. I really recommend checking it out on our website. And then if you look over at the blog posts, again, these are going to be slightly shorter articles that we've written. Some of our past articles, as you can see on the screen, we can talk about memory or data storage in our DNA. And they're, again, very great opportunities to bring scientific literacy to everyone within our Columbia community and out as well. So again, I recommend checking it out. If you have any more questions about what kind of articles we usually write about and what the writing process is like, how to become an editor, and so on and so forth, don't hesitate to ask.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ella Safran. I'm the current president of the Columbia Science Review Executive Board. And now we're going to go over some of our past executive board events, which are things that I am actually the most passionate about. Just a bit of background about myself. I've been a part of Columbia Science Review since freshman year, and I cannot say enough about it. I actually even switched majors and still decided to stay in the club because I love it so much. But one aspect I really want to emphasize is the fact that you can really come from any background. You could be studying political science, engineering, etc. And we welcome this because we want to promote scientific inquiry for people and individuals of any background. Next slide, please. Our most recent and main event that we hosted was a sustainable fashion show. And so we sought to promote the social, economic, and political impacts of the fast fashion industry, not only in the US, but also globally. And so to do this, we featured some very talented designers, mainly in the New York City community. And we also recruited fellow Columbia students to be models, and we showcased these various forms of fashion that are actually safe for the environment. So for instance, we had one individual from the Columbia Material Science Lab, and she actually was capable of making clothing out of soil and dirt. And it sounds crazy, but the clothing was actually incredible. And it was an amazing event. But that is just one of many that we've put on so far. We also like to host a lot of panels with esteemed panelists such as doctors, scientists, and even Nobel Prize winners. And we host these on a variety of topics. For instance, we had the past, present, and future of cancer, and we've also had a Black scientist panel as well. I also actually have personal experience working with the chemistry Nobel Prize winner, as I worked in Dr. Martin Chalfie's lab. He was a 2008 Nobel Prize winner for discovering GFP, which is the fluorescent protein that allows us to do a lot of really interesting scientific research today. And so it was a great experience hosting him as well. And this is just a plethora of some of the opportunities and people that you'll be able to meet and coordinate with if you would like to join the club. We also have a variety of partnerships, not only with other undergraduate clubs such as EcoReps and the Columbia Undergraduate Science Journal, but a class, if any of you are freshmen, you'll become very familiar with, Frontiers of Science. We also like to partner with them. And actually, in some cases, we arrange it so if you show up to the event, you can actually get extra credit. And we also partner with Columbia departments such as the Center for Science and Society and also the Climate School as well. This is a great question. How to join? My main man, Zeke, will take it over now.
Hey everyone, I hope you're having a good summer. I'm Zeke. I'm a rising junior at Columbia studying biomedical engineering. I joined CSR my sophomore year, so not quite as long as Ella, but I'm going to be the treasurer for CSR this coming year. In terms of how to join, if you want to go to the next slide. This is kind of the process I remember from last fall, but the timeline is, as maybe you probably know, the first day of class is Tuesday, the 5th of September. Usually the club fair, which you can kind of see a picture of how it will kind of look. It's kind of a mosh pit, a little bit chaotic, but we'll have a table there for CSR. Will probably be that Friday of the first week of school. And then the following Tuesday, we're going to host another joint Q&A session with the editorial board in person, probably the evening of Tuesday, the 12th of September. So you can answer any more questions you have. And then Sunday, how it was last year was that following Sunday, the applications will be due at midnight, at least for executive. I think we had the same due date for both parts of the club last year. But yeah, it's just a short Google form usually where we ask you some questions and like why you're interested in the club. But yeah, so that will be due then. And then now just for executive, we'll have short interviews. They're very casual, no need to stress about them. But on Tuesday and Wednesday after that Sunday, we'll have short interviews with you, which we'll set up. And then the following week, we'll have our first exec meeting And we meet every Tuesday around 8 p.m., 8 to 9 p.m. So just 1 hour a week. So it's really nice because many people here have pretty busy schedules and are balancing classes. And I'm on the rowing team here, so I have that commitment as well. So it's been a really cool club where you can come in once a week, meet a lot of really cool people and plan some really fun events, and then kind of go to the next part of your week. So yeah, that's the timeline.
So we're going to move to kind of a more free-form part of it. This kind of concludes the CSR focused part, but all of us have a lot of experience with doing science at Columbia. So here are some kind of bios. Oh, that picture is a little off-center. It's okay. All of us have experience doing science at Columbia, and we also wanted to give an opportunity for you all who maybe haven't had a lot of chances to meet with upperclassmen, especially, just an opportunity to ask some questions. So I guess we can quickly go around and introduce ourselves and our background in science. So I'm Brian. I'm the one in the middle top. I'm a rising junior as well. I'm studying physics and math, and I have experience doing research in the physics department. I know a lot of the teachers and professors. If any of you are in Cs and you need to take an intro class, I might be TAing your intro physics class. So that could also be something that we bump into each other with. And so if anyone's interested in getting involved in research in the physics department or taking math classes or physics classes, I'd be happy to answer. And I don't know if anyone else wants to quickly introduce themselves.
I guess I'm the only one who hasn't talked about themselves yet. So hi, I'm Greg. I'm a rising junior studying bio at Columbia. Let's see, I joined CSR, oh goodness, my freshman spring. So I've been around for a while. And when I'm not doing CSR stuff, a lot of my time is spent as part of CUEMS, which is our campus ambulance service. So for those of you who are considering pursuing medicine or just had questions about the pre-med track at Columbia, feel free to ask me. I think a couple other people here may have been pre-med. So we can all help you out.
I know I already introduced myself, but I can also give a little more context to my time in CSR. So I'm a rising senior in CC, and I actually joined, I think at the beginning of my sophomore year, maybe spring of my freshman year. I forget at this point, but I've held every single position there is to hold. I was a writer, I was an editor, I was the director of logistics for a while. And then I was managing editor my junior year, and now I'm editor in chief. So I can definitely speak to a lot of different perspectives in CSR. Monica is also here, who's our chief design officer. So again, we should be able to bring a lot of perspectives from the editorial side point. If you guys have any questions on that, I'm also involved in research up at the medical center. So like everyone's been saying, if you have any questions on that, definitely ask.
So I will quickly move to this slide. Here's some of the things that we'd be happy to answer, questions we'd be happy to answer, anything related to Columbia Science Review, what our application process is, what the interview process is. Just like Zeke mentioned, we want to emphasize that the application and the interview are very low stress. So don't worry about like preparing for interview questions, especially the interview is really just a way for us to get to know you a little bit more as a person, but we're not going to be grilling you with coding questions or coding problems or something. So don't let that be something that prevents you from submitting an application. And I believe editorials application involves like they give you an article and you edit it and they see like what you did. So that also shouldn't be something that you should be stressing too much over. So yeah, anything related to Columbia Science Review, we'd be happy to answer. Also, for a lot of you, we know you're freshmen, so you're coming into Columbia for the first time. We'd be happy to answer anything about schedules and workload, class registration, which is always a pain, especially as you start taking some of the core classes that are impossible to get into. Science placement exams, like in the physics department, if you want to take the accelerated track, professors in the science department, in any science department, doing research or other clubs related to science or anything else, we'd be happy to answer. So yeah, feel free to. We're here to answer anything that you might want to ask. So let us know.
I see a hi from Sebastian in the chat. Sebastian, do you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
I have a question. So how do you manage extracurriculars and also like the heavy workload? And this is coming from somebody who wants to do the pre-med track, but also wants to major in neuroscience.
Maybe one of the pre-meds do you want to take that
Yeah,
one?
Greg, do you want to take that
I
one?
can take it. I would say CSR has been really good for me because, you know, our physical meeting time isn't so stressful at all, just 1 hour every single week. So a lot of the work actually kind of comes on my own time, so I can sort of manage it how I want to, which is really a benefit. And at least for exec board, I think you'll find that we're all really close. And when it comes to like planning events and stuff like that, we'll always like break into sort of smaller groups that you can, you know, coordinate with, talk with on your own time. So that way it becomes super simple to plan events and be a part of CSR at least.
Yeah, one thing I'll add on to that is CSR is definitely a very I'm not going to say like low commitment, but it's something that you won't expect it to like take up all of your time. It's a lot of like, especially doing science majors is a lot of work, a lot of P-sets and tests and such, but it's something that I found to be very manageable because the 1 hour meeting time per week is much less compared to a lot of other clubs. And a lot of the work, like Greg mentioned, is things that you can do on your own time. So you might set an agenda of things that you need to accomplish for the next week. And then by the next meeting, you just find time over your week to do it. So it enables you to kind of plan your own time and have your own time management, because I guess like forcing everyone to come to like many meetings per week isn't always the best for everyone. So I found it to be a pretty good balance.
As for time commitment, oh, sorry.
Go for it, go for it.
Speaking to time commitments on the editorial side, we also have weekly meetings. We meet on Thursdays for 1 hour, but usually it's pretty flexible to the timeline. So for example, if a draft of your article is due, then we will all be meeting that Thursday. But for example, once everything is in and it's just brainstorming week, we may not have a meeting. So it's not meant to be something that eats away at your schedule at all. It's just supposed to supplement it. And again, hopefully like what you're writing about is something you're interested in. The articles aren't crazy long, so it doesn't take up too much time, but definitely we want to make sure that people who are working on their articles and illustrations, you know, are putting in their effort and they care about what they're writing, just because it's way more interesting to read something when you can tell someone cares about the topic. And then I see a question from Lauren in the chat asking if it's possible to be a part of the review in multiple capacities, like as a writer, editor, or illustrator. So I think this may have happened a few times in the past, but it's not the most common. It definitely is possible to hold multiple roles on the editorial side of the club at once. All this would require is separate applications. So for example, you would fill out your normal application, and where you would need to provide a writing sample, you may also need to provide an illustration sample, just so that way we can evaluate both ends of that. And as long as someone is able to keep up with their required tasks, then yeah, there's no issue in holding multiple roles.
I would also like to add that, as Amanda mentioned, you can easily move around within the club. You can, as she mentioned previously, that she had multiple roles. She went from editor to writer and vice versa. So it is plausible to do multiple things as well.
I'll read the next question in the chat from Dory. Am I saying that correctly? They said, hi, just out of curiosity, are executive run events usually on the weekend or during the weekdays? So typically we're trying to restructure things this year. We're trying to decide whether or not we should focus on planning less events, but put more energy into them, like the fashion show. We had over 200 guests and it was something that we worked on for a variety of months. Or we could put on smaller events, which is not that large of a commitment, but at the same time, it feels like something that you can just put together really quickly. So typically we have our executive run events during the weekdays. I believe for the fashion show, we had it on a Thursday because, again, just clarifying, if any of you are freshmen, typically you don't have classes on Friday. There may be some people where you just have to have a class on Friday, unfortunately, but Thursdays usually works for people. So in conclusion, they're typically during the weekdays. I see we also have a question from Priyanka. What does the application for the executive board look like? So Brian touched on this earlier. Following the application, you're going to have an interview. You're just going to be asked like simple questions about why you want to join CSR, what you like about science, etc. It's been a while since I applied, so I need to refresh my memory on this question. But I would say you talk about why you're interested in CSR, things that you could contribute, such as if you have examples for events or ideas that you have or you want to suggest, and also maybe what science means to you. Again, it's very low stakes. We're very accommodating, and I want to highlight the fact that CSR is quite a community, and we're really there to help each other and just spread the love for science.
Yeah, one thing I'll quickly add on to that is for the actual application, one thing we'll ask you is to propose an event. On the executive board side, we're always looking for ideas for new events. And a lot of people, they will propose an event idea when they first apply, and they stay with the club a few years, and eventually they find the time and the energy to kind of put this whole event together. So I think for the fashion show, this was an event that one of our members named Sonali right, proposed at some point, and it was kind of like her passion project, and eventually she and Ella kind of spearheaded this whole thing in the last year. So these you'll be proposing an event, but that's not just for us to see, it's also because we want to see the ideas, and there's a pretty good chance that if you're really passionate about the event that you're proposing, that we actually put it into fruition. So that's a pretty exciting part of this club. So there's a question from Eileen asking, what do the project timelines typically look like during the school year? How many projects are each member usually working on at a time? Also wondering how to get involved with CUEMS. So I guess I can answer the first ones, and then maybe Greg, you can take the CUEMS question. So project timelines differ a lot. They vary depending on the size and scope of the project. So for a typical panel project, you might be in a group of maybe 3 or 4 people, and that might be like an 8-week planning process. That's a very kind of drawn out planning process, but we might the first couple of weeks will be mostly doing brainstorming and planning for the semester. And then once we decide on the different events that we're going to be doing, we will schedule those events for different parts of the semester. So we'll have one kind of late first half of the semester. So before midterms, we might have one closer to the final season. And depending on the different projects, that planning process will look different, but it will essentially just be you and a small group of maybe 3 or 4 people working to get that panel project done. For bigger projects like the Sustainable Fashion Show, that was essentially an entire semester of planning. And then we had one big event at the end of the semester. So in terms of how many projects each person usually works on at a time, at any one time, you're probably only working on 1 or maybe 2 events. But one thing that might happen is if we want to do one big event at the end of the semester, but have some smaller events, like this, for example, is something we might consider a smaller event. We might be able to plan a small event quickly with some subset of the members of the club, and then you might also have a role in the bigger project. So again, it kind of depends on the different projects that we're planning for the semester. And yeah, Greg, if you want to answer your experience with CUEMS.
Yeah, for sure. If you want to get involved with CUEMS, we'll have our own sort of separate info session. Just keep an eye out on the CUEMS Instagram or the CUEMS website for that. Generally, it depends on whether you're already certified as an EMT in the state of New York or whether you still need to do the course. CUEMS offers both course sponsorships, which is pretty much a semester-long class that you take here in New York. After you finish that, you can either get your EMT license independently by yourself, or through the course sponsorship, and then generally the semester after you can actually apply to CUMS, and that's just a typical, I think a couple of interviews, and then yeah.
Real quick before we answer more questions, I just also wanted to point out that one thing I really valued about CSR was one really cool thing is having all these cool people who have had experiences at Columbia. Like you could have Greg or Brian, and if you have questions as a freshman or in any year, you can always ask them and they can provide really helpful experience, because our meetings are often very like, we're just like in a classroom meeting, like talking about our project. And I've definitely gotten some really good advice and met some really awesome people there, which has been nice. And the other thing I wanted to add is with the events and the meetings, it is a lot about however much you want to put into it is kind of like what you'll get out of it. So it's usually like 3 or 4 people working on a smaller event, or in the fashion show example, like most of the club was working on a bigger event. But whatever your task is, like especially in those smaller events, it's really like how much, like how many professors you want to reach out to for your panel, or how much do you want to like advertise to your friends to come and see your, like come to your event, or like do you want to try to get food for your event? So it's a lot of it is, it's all possible, and it's kind of the sky's the limit, and it's just kind of a matter of like how much time and energy you want to put into your event, which is really cool. And at the end of the day, it's really satisfying to see the event come together. So yeah, it's a really cool experience.
Well, also, I'm very eager to take this question by Dory because I have a few strategies. The question is, do you have advice for getting more involved in research and internships? One thing I will say is Columbia is a great institution to be involved in research, because practically everywhere you turn, you can see a professor that is studying something very interesting. So the first thing I would suggest is go by department and determine what subject you're interested in. Let's say it's animal sciences or neuroscience. I would go to the Columbia department website and look for the professor's emails. And then particularly in a template to the professor, you want to say something about yourself, your past experience, what you like about their lab, and then if they potentially have time to meet, and then also attach your resume as well. So I would do that. You can do that through the Columbia department list. As for internships, see, this is where a background in econ comes in handy. Columbia gives you access to this database called PitchBook, where you can essentially see almost any CEO or employee's email. And luckily we have that. So if you really feel like bothering some CEOs, which, you know, I fully support, you can send it to these biotech businesses or something like that if you're looking for something more abstract for internships. Also, Columbia has Handshake, which is a great source where you can connect with employers and recruiters, etc.
Yeah, I can also speak a little bit on the research end. In terms of getting involved in research on campus with any department really, I think the key is just don't be scared of bothering people. So cold email a lot. My freshman year, I believe I emailed 14 professors in the physics department, and I think maybe 12 of them didn't respond to me. One of them said no, and then one of them said yes, or not even yes, but just like, we can talk about it. So just don't be prepared to not hear back, especially if you're emailing professors directly. But another good strategy is to get in contact with teachers that you're taking class in or you have some personal relationship with. So right now I'm doing research in a condensed matter physics lab. And the way I got involved with that was I went up to my E&M professor who I like did well in the class with, and I asked, yeah, do you know any people in like the condensed matter department that might be interested in taking on undergraduate? And he said, oh, this guy might do it. So then I emailed him, and then his email response to me was, quote, okay, if Professor Zeitz says so, then fine. So I don't know, there's different ways, and I think there's not really any one way that anyone gets involved in research, but yeah, cold emailing and being brave enough to just ask, and the worst they can say is no, but that's okay. And in terms of internships, beyond Columbia, I'll mention a couple of good resources like Handshake, which I've never used, and PitchBook, which I've also never heard of, but sounds like good resources. For other science internships, I think a lot of them are just external applications, so you'll just have to write that. It's useful to use your Columbia email when you're applying for things because it gives you credibility in some way. And yeah, I think these kinds of things, especially for people going to Columbia, it comes easier than at other schools, definitely. And I think, yeah, I think the research question is open. So if anyone else wants to jump in, you always can. There's another pre-med question for Greg.
I see, Marlene, that you've asked about some other past events we hosted. I can talk a little bit about one event that we did. Actually, Brian and Ella were helping me on this. So we did something that was a sort of high school outreach event where we put together presentations on, climate change, other cool science stuff that we thought was maybe like important to share with some local New York City schools. We coordinated with these people and sort of just gave our presentation. It was really cool to interact with these kids, even though they were a little bit younger than we expected. But I think the really important thing is pretty much it's open, because in the past we've never really done anything outreach before. But like as soon as whoever came up with the idea came up with it, we got a lot of the support for it, and anything's really possible. So as long as you think of it, don't be afraid to present your ideas, and I'm sure a lot of people will be on board, and there's a good chance we can actually host these sorts of events. And for Sebastian, Columbia provides shadowing in their hospitals. The main Columbia affiliated hospital is Columbia, like New York Presbyterian, which is a little bit far from campus. So I would say if you're interested in shadowing, it might be better to stick to Mount Sinai, which is right next door to Columbia. They have their own shadowing program. It's not Columbia affiliated, but I believe you just have to apply to the program. In case you did want to go up to New York Presbyterian on 168th Street, I'm sure they also have their shadowing, a shadowing program where you just pretty much fill out your own application to the program. But then I think most of it will be on you to email like individual doctors and ask them, for any shadowing opportunities. As for clinical experiences, again, I think the main, I would say the only like Columbia sponsored clinical experience is CUMS. Aside from that, you might have to look into other options like getting, CRNA licenses or something like that. But let's see, once you're a sophomore and declare your major, you also declare as pre-med, and then from there you get a pre-med advisor. You can even meet with a pre-med advisor before declaring a major. So if you are interested in looking for like various clinical experiences of any sort, I highly encourage you to talk to them. They'll have a full list of everything you can do. But yeah, so far CUMS is the only like Columbia affiliated clinical experience. Oh, and Jose, I am recording it. So yeah, I'll make it available later. Yeah, no problem.
So Jesse has a question about chem placement, which I don't know anything about. I don't know if anyone else does.
I know, okay, so I did not do the chem track, but even if you get a 5 on the AP Chem exam, you still have to take Chem 1 and 2 unless you do the accelerated placement track, but I cannot speak on that very well.
There's another question on how is intro to bio? So if any of the bio majors want to, and Gen Chem, questions on in the intro tracks.
I think one of our freshmen last year did intro bio straight into freshman year, which I didn't even know was possible, to be honest. I took intro bio last year, my sophomore year, which is more normal. And it was definitely, I think it had a reputation with the old professor, and maybe, I don't know if anyone on the core took it with Professor Moshwich was, I believe, the professor. But I get the sense that they're trying to make it more like of manageable class, and I definitely thought it was definitely very taxing class, but comparable to other like Gen Chem or maybe like intro physics or something like that. So definitely a tough class, but also digestible.
I'll add on to that and say that while intro bio was definitely challenging, I never once felt like I didn't have any resources or like any resources for help that I could go to at any point. So there were always professors that were willing to, you know, coach you through things, super helpful TAs. So there are a lot of resources. So it's not, you know, the most difficult undergrad course in the nation.
I can take the question on Gen Chem as well as psychology. So I had a great experience in Gen Chem. I believe I had I think his last name was Savitz. I'm sure I'm saying it wrong.
I think it's Savitsky.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's correct. Thank you, Savitsky. Greg, I'm not sure if you had him as well. He was a very monotone talker. He basically just read off the slides. It was a good experience. I like chem. And then I took Gen Chem 2 over the summer, which was also a really good experience. So if you are feeling like you can't fill in your coursework or for any other reasons, if you do want to take a class over the summer, you can do that. It is kind of complicated, so I wouldn't really advise doing it. So I like Gen Chem. Also psychology, if you take AP Psych, then you can place out of the first psych class you have to take, which is good. I find all the psych classes very enjoyable. There's a variety. I took a seminar class called Evolution of Language. So it talked about how humans specifically evolved language and how that contradicts evolution as we know it. It's very complicated. And with the core, I would say for, I don't know, any new students here on the call, the core can definitely hinder your ability to take more classes, but it also causes you to take classes you never thought you'd pursue. So it's a double-edged sword in that sense. I think it would definitely be manageable to answer your question, Sebastian.
I think another thing with the core is it's how much work your core classes end up being is highly dependent on the professor that's teaching each core class. So like my university writing professor wasn't even a professor, she was like a PhD student, and she was the most chill teacher ever, and it was honestly like one of the like smoothest experiences I've ever had. I've had one CC professor that was really bad, and there was a lot of reading for no real benefit. But then I had the second semester CC professor that was a lot more chill and try to lower the expectations of the reading as much as possible. So it's hard to say how much the core ends up actually like affecting your other course load, but it can range from hindering somewhat to severely hindering. Just do your research on the professors beforehand. Does anyone have experience with study abroad as a pre-med?
Sorry. So I was pre-med basically until a week ago, so it probably will change again. And I'm a bio major, by the way. I'll be a senior this year, as I said. And it was always my dream to go abroad when I was in high school and everything. And I think talking with my advisor, and because I also had a language requirement I needed to do, and I wasn't that productive with my class schedule, because freshman year was COVID, so I took it a little bit, I think I took 4 classes. And so definitely didn't really fit in my schedule, because I think some of the classes they do want you to take at school, and so if you took them senior year, maybe you could do that. But I did go abroad over the summer from between sophomore year and junior year. I did Columbia's core in Paris, which was great. I ended up taking Art Hum and Music Hum, which was really nice because kind of like they were saying, the core is an opportunity to take some classes that maybe you don't give some focus to, or don't really think about as much when you have bio exam the next day. So it's really awesome. I was able to, go see an opera or go to the Louvre for my class requirements and not have any scary bio classes looming over me. Definitely, I think taking it over the summer was a really good choice for me because then I didn't feel strained or like I was moving anything too much over like during the school year. But that's also because I didn't want to have a really crazy senior curriculum. So that's just my perspective on abroad. If you have any more questions about that specific program, like you can always message me about that.
Great. Do we have any more questions, or we can also, we provided our names in the presentation. So if you want to reach out to us with any specific questions, because we'd love to answer them. Unless there's any other ones.
And definitely come by and say hi in person once you're here, and we'll be at the table at the club fair, and then we'll also have another question and answer session in person.
Congratulations, all of you.
Yeah, congratulations on Columbia. I'm excited to see you, even if you don't end up joining CSR. Excited to see you around campus.
Yay! Thank you so much for coming. I hope we helped.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Come join the CSR family. We can plan a variety of events. It'll be great. Or we can write some articles. Editorial, you have to give them a shout out too.